Good
Hello,
evening.
woo!
How's the audio video level? Good to go?
Good to
Yes.
go. You look great.
Thank you. Thank you. So good evening. It's always a pleasure to be with my friends, chef culinarians from our region, from Central Florida. So thank you for allowing me to kind of share with you my passions for cooking, of course, but beyond that, to share with you my recent and growing passion for plant-based food. So what I have for you today are basically some ideas. You know, I cook as templates, and I cook with templates like most of us do. You know, I follow recipes to a point, and we tell our students all the time and our kitchen staff all the time, you start with recipes, but really they're just templates and they're ideas and they're abstractions to kind of run with. So what I have for you today are basically 3 templates, in my opinion, using some local seasonal ingredients. That makes sense. And then when it's all said and done, with some luck, we will have created a composed vegetarian entree that's not another plate of sides or a pasta dish or a mushroom burger. So we'll see. Okay, so you'll let me know when it's all said and done if I was even remotely successful. So the first component is my sort of interpretation of a crab cake. I mean, of course, crab cake, lobster cake, shrimp cake, they're legendary, right? So I'm going to take it to the Creole side a little bit. Holy Trinity to start. Grapeseed oil, some bell pepper, some onion, and some celery. You know, a famous chef would say, we're really cooking here, right? So this is the Holy Trinity, obviously. Bell pepper, onion, and celery. A little saute action. Doesn't have to be cooked to death because I want some texture left, actually. Okay, so we'll let this go for just a little bit. Always seasoning in layers. A little touch of salt, a little touch of pepper. Now this is sort of the Indian in me. I'm going to add some whole seeds to this. I have whole mustard seeds, whole cumin seeds, and whole fennel seeds. All right. Already it's different from your classic Creole cake, right? Mustard seeds, cumin seeds, and fennel seeds. Now, of course, I could have started with butter. I could have started with a number of things. But as much as I can today, I'm going to stay away from non-plant-based ingredients. The only 2 instances where you'll see me go towards a mayonnaise, which has egg, and a whole egg, which obviously has egg. But frankly, you can leave those out as well. So theoretically, we could make this dish entirely vegan. And that's the beauty of this. That's the way I'm thinking about food these days. You know, we use our bacon grease as a crutch. We use bacon as a crutch, in my opinion. Bacon makes everything better, they say. We can have a conversation about that. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, frankly. I shouldn't say that as a French trained chef, but I do. We should have a competition, you know? Classic dishes that involve plants, animals or seafood and other variations of that. By the way, I will not make a burger or a sloppy joe or ribs or anything like that and use jackfruit instead of pork. That is not how I cook. I just try to make dishes that are naturally abundant in flavor and nutrition and culinary sense, if you ask me, by simply starting and ending with plant-based ingredients for the most part. Okay, there's plenty of flavor here. Obviously, you gotta have some garlic. Now here again, I'm deviating from the typical Trinity. I have jalapeno. Okay, so Holy Trinity, onion, celery, bell pepper, garlic, and jalapeno. A little bit of oil, not too much. This is grapeseed oil, by the way. Seasoning in layers. Now, here's the difference. Chopped up collard greens. You're gonna like, what? Why are we doing this? Because why not? Because why not is the answer. By the way, there's some spice going on here. So if you see me struggling a little bit, it's because it's spicy, which I know means it's gonna taste great. So collard greens chopped up, okay? Just lightly blanched, basically kind of cooked. So we're coming up in our season in Central Florida where greens are abundant. Okay, so mustard greens, collard greens, they're all great. Okay, so great. Can do that. Sweet potato. not trying to cook all of it to death, okay? I just want some flavor. That's a chili cough. Just need a little bit of wine to chase it down. There you go. I feel much better.
So what wine are you drinking tonight while you're cooking?
Yeah, so I got, I started with a favorite of mine, Andrew Lane Proprietary Blend, 2016, I believe. 12, actually. Andrew Lane's a wonderful winemaker from Napa Valley. They've had a really hard time this year. Since then, I've switched to a little Oakville. So I'm doubling it today.
Nice.
We're building the layers of this so-called crab cake, edamame. So here's the other thing. As chefs, we tend to leave out the thoughtful proteins for vegetarians, if you ask me. And, edamame is a wonderful choice in lieu of tofu. So people frown upon tofu a lot, but edamame is a great option instead. Obviously, they're both soybean. One is highly processed. The tofu would be highly processed, but soybean is natural. So just to review really quickly, Holy Trinity, jalapeno, garlic, collard greens, sweet potato, edamame, salt, pepper. That's it, okay? So I'm building the layers of this cake that I'm going to make in a moment. And now going back to a Maryland-style crab cake. So I have some Old Bay blackening seasoning. I'll talk about spices in just a moment. You can see that it looks vibrant, it looks healthy, it looks unusual, it looks interesting, right? I mean, how many crab cakes can we have in our life? Most of us could go, if it's really well made, plenty. Okay, I love a good crab cake just like anybody else. But why not take the template of a cake and move it to a number of directions? That's how I think about food. We have cutlets in India. Cutlets are just those things. They're sort of croquettes, but not really. They're not deep fried. They're pattied up, and they're finished in a pan, finished in the oven. So to me, that's how I think about a cake. A savory cake, if you will, or a fritter, or in this case, a edamame, collard green, sweet potato cake. Okay, there's plenty going on here. Let me take this off the pan and transfer it to a bowl, as you would with a crab cake. Okay. So let's assemble this crab cake, if you will. Obviously, it's not a crab cake. This is a savory take on a cake. Edamame, sweet potato, collard green cake. Now, there's plenty of warmth here. Typically, you want to cool this down just a hair. You also want to taste this concoction at this stage. It tastes so clean, so fresh, and frankly delicious. Needs a little bit of salt. It's a bit more maybe. Okay, now for the binders of what would typically be a cake, right? Dijon mustard. Bit of mayonnaise. You can leave this out. You can have some sort of a plant-based gel, like a chia seed gel or something like that. Okay. And then an egg, just for a little bit of binder. The egg can again be replaced with a plant-based option. There are plenty of those these days. I know it's going to need a touch more salt. I mean, just think about the complexity of what we have so far. I love a good crab cake and a lobster cake, but this to me is interesting, It sort of titillates the tongue when you try it. And then last but not least, a little bit of breadcrumbs. Now, unlike a typical crab cake, you see I'm working this to death a little bit because I want the emulsion to happen. I want the mixing to happen. With the traditional crab cake, especially when dealing with lump meat or super lump meat or jumbo meat, we all tell our students to not break it down too much because we've paid so much for those big chunks of meat. In this instance, it's not so much an issue. It's going to take all of the breadcrumbs. Awesome. So I'm going to hold this. I'm going to hold this and let it chill out for a second. We'll come back to that. Are there any questions so far as I start the next component, if you will?
We've got some questions for you. Let's see.
Go for it.
What do you consider flavorful spices without being spicy hot?
So to me, you know, anything like a cumin, coriander, cinnamon, allspice, cardamom, clove, they're all spices to me, obviously, but none of them are spicy. So what makes something spicy is the presence of capsaicin, which is the enzyme that we perceive as being spicy. So when there's no capsaicin, you know, peppers are the only things that pretty much have capsaicin, then things can be consumed and be perceived as being spiced, but not spicy. So any spice really, other than cayenne or, you know, chili peppers that have natural heat, to me, fall in the category of spice. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, and someone else asked, why do you prefer grapeseed oil?
Well, today I went shopping. Grapeseed is a slightly high temperature cooking oil. So not knowing the temperament of my induction burner, I didn't want to use extra virgin olive oil because there's a chance that it might smoke a little too much. And so grapeseed oil tends to be a high smoking point kind of a cooking medium, and it's neutral. And so I wanted the flavor of the spices to stand out rather than flavor of the extra virgin olive oil. So most of the time I cooked with extra virgin olive oil, but today I just looked at it. I looked at it on the shelf in the grocery store and went, you know, there's a great opportunity to make the point. I'm glad somebody asked the question as to why we would use a neutral high temperature cooking oil instead. So this next component is it's classic Indian comfort food. This is something we ate. A version of this is something we ate all the time during the monsoons, and they're pakoras. If you've been to an Indian restaurant, you know exactly what a pakora is. Pakora comes in two forms. It's either battered or it's dry frittered, as I'm about to do. You know, it's not unlike fried shallots that we serve on steaks, but there's more going on here. So the first thing is, I have thinly sliced onions, fresh ginger, and carrot tops, right? So there you go. There's a big ding, ding, ding. What do I do with carrot tops? What do I do with these hard things that are so hard to cook down? Well, if you can chop it really finely, they make great fritters. So that's what I have here is an onion, carrot top, ginger, pakora. The ingredients are just those three ingredients first. A touch of salt to draw out the moisture. And now for some of the spices. So here's an example of some of the spices I'm going to use that don't have a lot of heat. I will add heat in just a moment. A touch of cinnamon. I'm going to take this in the Moroccan direction a little bit. Say North African direction. So cinnamon, cardamom. It's not cardamom. I hear that a lot, and it kind of gets me a little, I cringe a little bit every time I hear it. It's cardamom, M. The last letter is also M. So cardamom, turmeric, ground turmeric. So I'm only using ground spices here because I want them to amalgamate and mix in really seamlessly with this fritter. Nutmeg, ground nutmeg. How much? If you notice, I'm not measuring because visually I kind of have a sense of what's going in. Typically, you know, the hard spices like the cardamom and nutmeg, you want to back off a little bit. Certainly even the cinnamon. Turmeric, cumin, coriander can go in almost in equal parts. Allspice. So you can see this is clearly not so Indian per se. It's more in the direction of either the Caribbean or, in this case, Morocco or North Africa as a whole. Okay, so mix these spices in. Oh, I can smell it. It smells like Thanksgiving already. right? But it's a savory Thanksgiving. So here's a great idea for a garnish at the table. You may do whatever you do for Thanksgiving, but imagine putting these warm spices into a fritter as an appetizer for the table. The main course is going to seem kind of lame after this burst of flavor, if you ask me. Okay, a touch of cayenne. This is actually red Indian chili pepper. I'm just generically calling it cayenne. This is Kashmiri red chili powder. So it comes from the foothills of the Himalayas. It's bright red. It's sort of like a paprika, like a Hungarian paprika. It's vibrantly red and it's got some spice. Okay, but this is not crazy spicy if you ask me. And now, what binds this? This is what binds this fritter or this pakora. Chickpea flour, garbanzo flour. So it's high protein, gluten-free, obviously, but I'm not doing this because it's gluten-free. I'm doing this because this is what's done traditionally. This is how we bind things out often in India, is through non-glutinous flour. So chickpea flour, garbanzo flour is probably the most commonly used binder for things in Indian dishes. Extremely versatile. It's got a nice clean flavor. It's got its own flavor. It's not a generic, I mean, it is processed, but it's not highly processed if you ask me. It's a whole grain that's been dried, whole pea that's been dried, and they're just ground up finely. It's not mixed in with anything else, none of that stuff. This needs a touch of water. This is just normal water. Not too much. This is not a wet batter, okay? This is just, you want to bind it just enough to be able to hold it. You'll see where I'm going with this. You don't want to put too much flour. This is a little bit sticky. It's not unlike making a ciabatta, a really sticky dough. I know Chef Prosel's in the audience, but you know, he's comfortable with his pastry doughs and sticky doughs. So this is meant to be sticky. It's a little uncomfortable to hold on to. Don't let that deter you from not putting too much flour. You don't want too much flour in here. You want the ingredients to stand out. And the flours are just there to kind of bind the ingredients ever so slightly. Okay, that's done. That's all I'm going to use. So let me just pull this fryer closer to the action. Hope you can see that. Awesome. So it's my
Question
little...
for you. Where do you get the chickpea flour?
It's available in Publix these days. It's available in every... This is Bob's Red Mill, by the way. This is Bob's Red Mill chickpea flours, which is a common brand. It's available in most health food stores. I got this from a local health food store. It's also available in Publix. I know that for a fact. Amazon, of course. But okay, so 360 degrees, and these are going. Golden brown, delicious. You notice how they are? I'm not packing them. You don't want to make a ball. That's the temptation, is to make it a ball. You don't. You barely hold on to it and drop it. Not from a height, obviously, but just enough to be able to get it going. I don't want to overcrowd this. Just 3 of these should do it. And we'll hold on. We'll come back to this later. I'm just going to wash my hands real quick. I'll be right back, folks.
That makes sense. Hey, Chef.
Yes, sir.
Why is it important for chefs to promote more vegetarian and vegan food these days?
Great question. Give me 1 second. I talk about this frequently, and I write about this, I talk about this. You know, as chefs, most of us have been through a classical training, you know, and there's so many more vegetarian ingredients, plant-based ingredients than there are meat-based ingredients. That's the first fact. You know, I talk about this. The reasons to be more proficient with vegetarian food for chefs who are the professionals is because we're respected. You know, we're looked up to by the general public. And the general public is craving ideas to help them create more tasty, creative, plant-based food. The health reasons are obvious. The environmental reasons are obvious. The cost reasons are obvious. The creativity reasons are where I think the case needs to be made. You know, we're trained to tourne a potato for minutes on end so it looks just right and passes the certification exam. But in that same time, if we could teach our young culinarians to make a great vegetarian sauce that doesn't depend on chicken stock, or a great patty, as I'm about to show you, that's not a crab cake, or a great fritter doesn't have bacon in it, you know, we will have expanded enormously what we as chefs who are trained to do can do to help make our food systems more tasty, more sustainable, healthy, and interesting, to be honest with you. Vegetarian forward food is interesting just as much as the other stuff is. It's all about how we're programmed. So I hope I answered your question, but
Very good.
I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunity in culinary schools these days. We're spending too much time stuck in the same old ideas. If we could kind of use those great techniques to promote preparations of ingredients that don't lean on meats and even seafood unnecessarily. I mean, we don't always need a big portion of steak in the middle. I know some of us think we do. But day in and day out, who eats like that? We don't really eat like that. So having meat as an accent is one thing, but to use it as the centerpiece and completely disregard the other things, I feel like our creativity is kind of going flat. You know, so as chefs and trained professionals, we have to, when we're presented with a basket that doesn't have meats or flavoring ingredients, we have to create that flavor. It helps us become better chefs. And I always end with this. I mean, how do we marinate our meats? We marinate our meats in soy and ginger and garlic and fresh herbs and wine and things like that. None of those ingredients that are meant to impart flavor for meats are meat-based. They're all derived from plants. That's the irony. We're trying to put flavor into meat using plant-based ingredients. So why not just cook with plant-based ingredients? Because they obviously already have the flavor. So I'm almost baffled about that. Like, we spend so much time marinating our meats and injecting them and all that, but everything we inject them with is from a plant. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, for sure.
I get all passionate about this. You got me going with that question. I'll be right back. I'm gonna turn these guys, and these are nice golden brown. Actually, I think my guy came out. Make sure. Go. Okay. I feel like my fryer's cut off here a little bit, so let me just see what's going on. Oh, I know the problem.
Ah, there we go. Happens
There we
to
go.
all of us.
There we go. Who did that? All right, I'm back on track, I believe. Now, the fritters are frying. What I'm going to do is I'm going to finish these cakes, throw them in the oven. I'm going to do one more component with plantains, actually bananas, in just a moment. And you'll see how this composed dish comes together. But frankly, all of the ingredients of the dish, let me pull this back up. Get it back to temperature a little bit. There we go. We don't need to see the fryer. We understand we're frying.
Mhm.
Okay, that's good. There we go. It's on. We're good. So I'm just going to drop these cakes, these soy, collard green, sweet potato cakes. And they don't need to be perfectly formed. We're not trying to make perfect cylinders and discs. You could add butter into this pan. It's not necessary at all. You cut the heat down just a hair. So try to form it a little bit. Don't overpack it. Now one could, of course, drip this back, pat this back into a panko, kind of a mixture, herb panko or something. I'm just going to make two. Jennifer, I'm going to eat this tonight. This is going to be our dinner.
Yum, yum, Jennifer.
The fryer's coming back into action. Are there any questions while I'm doing this?
Yes, Patrice Fleming asks, are the sweet potatoes partially cooked? That's a great
They're
question.
not, but they've been diced up really small. I mean, it's literally a small dice. So sweet potatoes, cook a little bit faster than normal potatoes, if you ask me. So a little bit of pan action, a little bit of oven action, and they're done. So no, these were not cooked partially. And a little bit of texture is not the worst idea in the world, frankly.
It's true.
If they were slightly under, it makes it more interesting. You're definitely not going to get ill from it. It's not like undercooked meat. If you eat a raw sweet potato, you'll be just fine.
Yeah, that's true. How about the breadcrumbs? What kind of breadcrumbs did you use?
These were just standard panko breadcrumbs. You know, you can leave them out if gluten is an issue. You can use a chia gel of some kind to bind it. You can use, yeah, chia gels are really good and hearty. They hold it, just a little bit of chia seeds and water. Mix it up, make a gel.
Are you the oil that you're using now, is it the same as before?
Yeah, it's the same grapeseed oil that kind of holds up to high heat a little bit. And in just a moment, I'm going to turn this one time, throw it in the oven. It's really moist. It's barely being held together. In the perfect world, I would chill this in the refrigerator, let it kind of come together a little bit, and then work with it. I could also add more panko. I didn't want to. I wanted it to be on the moist side. It's just enough. You see, there's a nice crust. Voila.
Tell us about your restaurant where you're frying that up.
Yeah, so Crest Restaurant is in its 12th year, and it's going strong. I'll be honest, I'm not there every day like I used to be for 11 plus years, but I have a feeling that my stamp is still on the food quite a bit. I'm going to throw this in the oven at 350, by the way. And so it's going well. You know, everyone's had to make some changes. Obviously, we're resilient. And Tom's doing a great job at the restaurant. Chef Phil's doing a great job in the restaurant. Jennifer's still curating all the wines. And they've got it. They don't need me anymore. Let's put it that way. I'm there. My ideas are, I think, still there. But day in and day out, I'm not needed. I'm focusing on things like writing books, doing demos with my friends, drinking some fine wine, thinking ahead, thinking about how best I can, you know, engage with the community I love so much, the chef community in the world, in ways that make sense. So don't be surprised if you hear from me moving forward to see if I can help you in any way.
Woohoo! Is your entire menu at Crest vegetarian?
It is not at all. We serve the finest seafood in this side of the coast, I think. And, you know, we have everything you can imagine: duck confit, you know, steaks, pork dishes, lots of poultry, lamb. And we also have some thoughtful vegetarian options, always. So no, Crest Restaurant's never been a vegetarian restaurant, but we've always had thoughtful ideas for vegetarian guests. You know, I don't resort to just a pasta. I at least don't resort to just a pasta dish or a soup or a salad. In fact, the book I just wrote, which is at the printing press, you know, there are 251 recipes in my Sinfully Vegetarian book, which is part of the Dreaming in Spice series. And of those 251 recipes, only 10 salad dressings and 10 salads, composed salads. So only 20 out of 250, you know, 5% maybe, are what you might consider typical vegetarian fare. A lot of it is kind of along the lines of what I'm doing today, rethinking familiar things by incorporating plant-based ingredients, lots of flavor, lots of spice, but not spicy, and creating composed dishes, which I'm hoping to show you in just a bit, 7:47. By 8 o'clock, I'm hoping to show you a composed dish that has all the ingredients, that shows you how these small bites can come together and make a big bite. So that's another way I think about food, vegetarian food is, you know, I always find chefs get stuck. Like, okay, what do I do? I know how to do this. I can stuff something in puff pastry and bake it in the oven, but then what do I do? Well, you think about it the same way as you do any other dish. There are components, there are contrasting flavors. You know, you have to play with the palate, the senses we have, contrast of textures, freshness, all of those things. So all those ideas that we use to create normal dishes are at play when it comes to vegetarian dishes. So that's my goal. Okay, so this next dish is inspired by street food from the great West African country of Ghana. So this is a Ghanaian street food called Kelewele. So Kelewele is something I served during one of our street dinners outside our restaurant a few years ago, and it was really well received. So I wanted to give you my impression of a Kelewele. This is going to have a lot more in it than typical the Ghanaian version, but I have a cast iron skillet. This is part of my tagine, actually. You know, my tagine base that Jennifer got me. So I'm going to put some Indian flavors, some Ghanaian flavors, bring it to you. It's a quick saute. We all know maduros, fried plantains, but this is a different thing altogether. You'll see in a moment. Curry leaves, leaves from the curry plant, fresh ginger. Whole curry leaves, yes, whole curry leaves. You do not want to chop up your curry leaves. This smells like South India already. Southern India takes great pride in its use of curry leaves. Now here's an unusual ingredient. You have to know how to use this. A pinch goes a long way. Asafoetida. It's used commonly in lentil dishes in India, like dal, but asafoetida is a typically South Indian kind of ingredient. Semi-ripe bananas. I happen to prefer plantains. I didn't find really good ones. So I have semi-ripe bananas. Wow. As one famous chef said, if we had smell-o-vision, you would be impressed. Touch of salt, always seasoning in layers. Touch of pepper. Now, spices, cumin, cumino, just a little bit. Kashmiri red chili powder, just a little bit. Lebanese sumac gives a nice tangy kind of earthy flavor. Yeah. And now this is going to make me cough. I got to step away. Local daddle peppers. So the Kelewele traditionally in Ghana would have a spicy Scotch bonnet or habanero style pepper. So instead of those, I happen to become in possession of daddle peppers that my friend Ken Goldberg gave me recently. And so I decided to use those instead.
Nice.
You just want to kind of coat these plantains, or in this case, a banana.
There he goes.
Yep, I smell them.
What brand are you using in the deep fat fryer?
This is a good old-fashioned vegetable oil.
Vegetable, okay.
Yeah. At the restaurant, we often use peanut oil, but here it's just vegetable oil. Soy sauce. This is not traditional Kelewele. This is my take on it. I'm bringing a bunch of umami together. Okay, we're just going to stew this down. Not to the point where it becomes a puree, but where it becomes a nice glaze onto those plantains. Voila. We all know we're supposed to season our fried products a little bit. So I'm going to season it just a hair. Okay. This is coming together. I'm going to plate in just a moment. So just to review, an edamame soybean collard green cake with some Old Bay blackening spice, and then Kelewele my style with ginger, daddle peppers, asafoetida, cumin, Kashmiri red chili, and curry leaves. Wow. And the fritters are onion, carrot top, ginger fritters. So I'm going to bring all this together in just a moment. You'll see how. Put this away. This can just cool down and kind of do its thing. It's glazing away nicely. Let me show this to you actually before I start plating the dish. Voila.
Nice.
Mm.
Let it keep going. And we can start plating. Are there any questions before I start plating?
Let me see. There were some more back here. I kind of question from Kirk Keefe. Question on consomme with the vegetable stock. What would you use as a raft and still remain plant-based?
That's a great idea. Great question. I've never done it. I mean, ultimately, you're trying to coagulate the protein. And so that's the purpose of the albumin kind of coagulates and catches everything and becomes that barrier, that raft. And so without really testing it, I suspect there are some derivatives from soybean or other kinds of plant-based proteins, maybe quinoa, maybe agar, some sort of a gel that would catch it. But agar melts and dissolves in heat, so that's not really the way to do it. Ultimately, it's about protein structure, and so I don't know the top of my head, unfortunately. I guess we can all call Chef Grant Achatz from Alameda. He would probably know.
Chef Brian wanted to know about what are the biggest changes that you have in developing your new menus at the restaurant?
Oh, during these times, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, my task before I kind of stepped away just a little bit during March and February was to help the restaurant management identify, you know, our core values, so to speak, you know, what our guests kind of come to expect. You know, the seafood stays, fresh seafood stays, the fresh produce stays, our braised dishes stay. So what we've done is, I think, kept those favorites and kept that tradition of weekend specials that draws our new customers in from afar. And Jennifer does a fantastic job making wine not just be something you sip because you're there, but rather it's an integral part of the experience when you dine. So between our favorites, our commitment to thoughtful sourcing and cooking from scratch, the talent that's in the kitchen and up front, and our standout kind of wine program, we've done a fantastic job, I think. We've been fortunate, but we've done a fantastic job.
Lance Cook asks, can you talk about, I'm going to mess this up, asafoetida?
Yeah, asafoetida is a root. So it's a root.
A root, okay.
Yeah, it's a root, and it's very common in South Indian cuisine. It's like the umami. It offers an earthy kind of pungency that's not, that's really an umami that's in the back. So we do a technique in South Indian cuisine or even North Indian cuisine that's called tadka. Tadka is not unlike some Chinese dishes, for example, will, you know, finish a dish with hot flavored oil, like a Szechuan oil or something like that. So tadka is a similar idea in Indian dishes where you cook your dish and then you finish it with this hot oil that's aromatic and infused with flavor, whether it's be with curry leaves or whole chilies or garlic or ginger or legumes and things like that, mustard seeds and cumin seeds. So the purpose of asafoetida is almost always in that particular case. It permeates the oil that's used to finish a dish with. So the tadka will almost always have some sort of hing, H-I-N-G. Hing is the Hindi word for asafoetida. By the way, asafoetida has an E in it, so A-S-E-F-O-E-T-I-D-A. A-S-A-F-O-E-T-I-D-A. So it's an unusual sort of a spelling. There's a letter there. Linda, you're the author. There's a letter that you wouldn't expect.
Those tricky letters.
Yep. Okay, I'm ready to plate. Are you? Are you ready to see the finished dish?
Yes.
All right. So, you know, I'm just going to bring this together. So ultimately, think about this. These are all small bites. Okay, the pakora is a small bite. It's delicious on its own. Serve it with a chutney, aioli, whatever. The kelewele, delicious. Stick a fork in it, eat it one at a time. You can't have just one. The cakes are just that. Serve it with the remoulade, salad, what have you. So they're all independent small bites that stand out on their own. They're full flavored, they're creative, and I hope, and they're plant-based. Other than the egg and the mayonnaise that I had in the cake, which I could have had substitutes for, everything is plant-based. So I'm gonna then compose these small bites in a way that provides the guest and yourself a fantastic, I think, nutritionally sound, texturally interesting, and culinarily sound dish. That's a composed dish. So I have some local microgreens, you know, sunflower sprouts and pea shoots, a little bit of fresh lemon juice, fresh heirloom cherry tomatoes, touch of salt, touch of pepper, touch of grapeseed oil. Don't really need it, just a touch, just to bring it together. Okay, so we start with the cake. And we come with the Kelewele, with the curry leaves and all. Little carrot top onion pakora. Nice bright seasonal salad of sunflower sprouts, pea shoots, lemon juice, heirloom cherry tomatoes. So there's a lot going on. You could have added a sauce in here for sure, a fresh sauce, a raw sauce, a cooked sauce, a wine-based sauce, anything that leaves the chicken stock out or the beef stock out. And this is a composed dish. It started with ingredients that were small bites that stand on their own, that are hors d'oeuvres really, or appetizers, but then they come together. This is not a plate of sides. This is a composed dish with protein, vitamins, obviously some lipids, and freshness. So there you have it. Soybean edamame collard green cake with onion and carrot top pakora. Kelewele, it's basically Caribbean, Indian, Ghanaian Kelewele, and then fresh, locally inspired raw salad.
Nice.
There you have it. I hope you like it. I hope it sounds good. I hope it sounds delicious.
And Jennifer, what's the wine for tonight with that dish?
So I'm gonna actually go a little bit lighter on that side. I want to go with something that's not gonna fight the spice on this dish. So I want to go with the Pinot Noir. Usually I like Australian Pinot Noir for things like this. They don't fight it. I've got some nice red raspberry, strawberry fruits that kick into it. So that is my wine pairing on that one. The brightness of an Australian Pinot Noir with a spiced dish.